What's good, everybody? Welcome to the Pull Up and Chat. My name is BJ Mathews, aka B Jizzle. Before we get started, follow us on the YouTube page, the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, Spotify, Iheartradio, Twitter, TikTok. You know what I'm saying? Like, share, subscribe, all of our YouTube videos. Hit that notification bell. Buy a subscribe button on our YouTube page. Get all of our updated content. Let's get it popping. All right, first off, like I said in my last video, I always appreciate all the love and support I've been getting since the Clipper video has been dropping the last month. My subscribers have gone up, the views been going up, you know what I'm saying? All glory to God, you know what I'm saying? Um, just appreciate all the support that you're giving me. So in return, I'm always gonna give y'all quality content, the best of my knowledge, you know what I'm saying? So I just gotta get that out the way. And I also want to make sure I tell people this. The reason why we have this platform is because we would like to give a platform where all players in the NBA get a fair evaluation outside the mainstream media who seems to have an agenda against certain guys. Here at the Pull Up Basketball Podcast, me and my co-host Rick Masters, who are basketball players ourselves, always want to give a fair analysis over each player. And I'm going to do that right now with a player that we just saw last night. Let's get into it. So the Clippers prevailed last night. What a game. Coming back from 25 points down over the Utah Jazz. I already told you about the Utah Jazz, man. I don't trust them. They're a great regular season team. But when it comes to the playoffs, they're just not it. Or when it comes to tight situations, they find a way to, lose their composure. They're going to have teams like that. Not everybody's going to be able to hold their composure throughout the entire game. So that's who the Utah Jazz are, man. So unfortunately, they laid the egg last night. So with that being said, the biggest reason why, the Clippers made a comeback. Of course, you had a few reasons. The role players from Isaiah Hartenstein, Luke Kennard, Reggie Jackson, and company. The biggest reason was the return of all-star small forward Paul George to the LA Clippers, dropping 34 points, went 10 for 20 from the field, 2 rebounds and 6 assists, led the charge in the second half, and brought them back to life. There's so many ways I can dissect this situation. Paul George took over not only just from his scoring aspect, but also playing defense, making very key plays on Donovan Mitchell, making key plays by reaching in on upside defense, making key plays with passes to Luke Kennard and Robert Covington and Reggie Jackson. You know what I'm saying? He just had a different energy, and his presence made him very, very well known for the rest of his teammates. And thank God, because the Clippers need some type of reinsurance after their 5-game losing streak. And Paul George was able to save the day and bring his teammates out of the funk they've been in. So, now that we got that out the way, PG, I have to ask the question. Actually, this is not my question. It's something I'm actually stating. Paul George will be a top 5 player in the NBA after this season is over. Again, Paul George will be a top 5 player in the NBA this season. Let's get into it. Now, listen, I know that may be pretty crazy what I just said, be controversial, and everybody may be rolling their eyes or whatever, like, oh my gosh, here this guy goes again. Listen, which is fine. I don't have an issue with people taking my takes and thinking that they're, crazy or whatever, because I'm not new to that. I've had many takes in the past that been right, and people were thinking at the time they were crazy. I had thought in 2018, I said to myself, Damian Lillard, I would take him over Russell Westbrook. Keep in mind, after 2017, Russell Westbrook just won the MVP. So this is going into 2018. Damian Lillard has not been proven. He was still under the radar. I was paying attention because I remember I tell y'all, I pay attention to the entire league. Damian Lillard was a better player, and I would trust him more than Russell Westbrook to lead my team. Lord behold, what happens in the 2018 playoffs? The Blazers knocked down the OKC Thunder, and Damian Lillard walks off the last second shot. I said going into this year, the Clippers were better than the Lakers, even though you had all these mainstream media people trying to put it into people's heads that the Lakers were better and they're going to the finals. Well, y'all see what's going on with this team. They're finding a way themselves to not even make the playing game. It's almost as if they're tanking on purpose. So we know who's the better team. The Clippers have beat them 4 straight times this season head to head. They have a better coach. They have a better system. Shall I go on? I said Paul George is better than Anthony Davis. People thought I was crazy. And from what we've been seeing, just even the past 2 years, especially this year, Paul George has been better with less time. Paul George is a better leader than Anthony Davis. Paul George has accomplished more than Anthony Davis. Paul George, people use the bubble to solidify his entire career without looking at every single season he's been in the NBA, which he's led his team to the playoffs. Anthony Davis has not done that. Paul George is more of a versatile player than Anthony Davis. I guess we can see Paul George is a better player right now, and the only people I disagree is people who are Laker fans. I said DeJounte Murray is a top 5 point guard this season. Now, this is still up for debate, but it looks like the Spurs have a chance to make the playoffs this season so he can actually prove it. And DeJounte Murray, the reason why I say he's a top 5 point guard is because he plays both ways of the ball. There's nobody in the NBA who does that. You know what I'm saying? And that's very important to me. How do you affect both sides of the ball at elite level? The reason why I say DeJounte Murray's been looked under is because of the team he's on and not getting a shot. But that looks like it's going to change this playoffs or this season when he's going to get a chance to make it to the playoffs. Now I'll get to Paul George. PG, listen. I said what I said. Paul George has everything to be a top five player in this NBA season, man. I said that with a straight face because look at it like this. Going just from last year, first of all, me being a top player, it's a year by year case. And this season, even though he has not played as much as the other guys, like, you know, MVP candidates, remember who Paul George, what he's been since he's been playing. Last year in the playoffs, there's only 3 other players I can say were definitively better than Paul George. Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Defensively, I mean the entire playoffs. That means your impact, your stats, the moments, the pressurized moments that you were in. There's only 3 players who are better than Paul George. Those 3 guys, Giannis, Kawhi, and Kevin Durant. Luka Doncic got knocked out in the first round. Trae Young had a great showing in the playoffs, but again, Trae Young, are you picking him over Paul George? No, you're not. Are you picking Donovan Mitchell over Paul George? No, you're not. Devin Booker and Chris Paul defeated the Clippers in that series, but Paul George was the best player on the court. He was the best player on the court. And the way that Paul George almost still was able to come out that series victorious with 3 guys injured, from Kawhi Leonard to Serge Ibaka and then Visca Zubac the last 2 games, is something that took the Phoenix Suns everything in their being to beat Hobble Clippers team. But I watched that series. Paul George is the best player in that series, right? Nikola Jokic got knocked out in the second round against the Phoenix Suns. I can go on and on. Damian Lillard got knocked out. You know what I'm saying? All these guys who somehow they just put over Paul George. Paul George led the entire playoffs in points, rebounds, assists, and minutes. The load that he carried, the moments that he was in, the leadership that he showed gets overlooked because of what happened in the bubble and the playoff P situation. People still overlook what he does well. So I'm not saying that Paul George didn't put a couple things on himself, you know, in the past. But what I am saying is let's not act like he's the only guy that's failed when it comes to NBA playoffs or whatever situation. He's not the only guy that's failed. So you got to give him credit for when he does things right. Now, top 5, again, ability. PG has the ability up there with Kawhi, Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, anybody you want to put in there. He has the ability. Sorry about that. You're talking about a guy who's 6'8", who handles the ball like a point guard, who can shoot threes, who can get to the basket, who plays elite defense. And from what I'm seeing, his leadership. I'm seeing a guy who's in his prime right now. Y'all got to remember, Paul George is 31. LeBron James is past his prime. He's 37 years old, and I'm not putting LeBron James top 5 by default anymore because the way I see it, if the Lakers don't make the playoffs, nobody should put LeBron James in their top 5. Hell, I wouldn't even fault you if you didn't put him in top 10. Now, people are going to say because, he's averaging this. I don't care. You can't be a top 5 player if you're not leading your team to the playoffs. You can't. Unless your team's just complete garbage, and that Laker team is not garbage. You got 3 Hall of Famers on that team. And you mean to tell me you can't make them to the playoffs? You played over 50 games this season. That should be enough to make the playoffs. So that's all I gotta say with LeBron. But the ability that Paul George has, the skill set that he has, the intangibles that he has, you can pretty much plug him in any system and he'll be successful. Paul George has been in pretty much every facet you could think of. As the best player on the team, he's taking his team to the playoffs every single year. Even though you guys gonna say that he got knocked out in this round, he still took his team to the playoffs. He took his team to the playoffs twice in the conference finals. He's accomplished all NBA teams. Now we're going back in the past resume, but I'm just trying to put some credence of leading up to this season, why people have forgot who Paul George really is, because they're focusing on just one instance in that bubble, and then also what happened against the Utah Jazz with the playoff P situation. But I'm trying to go back to give people real life situations to understand that the disrespect towards Paul George is crazy. Now, it was just a few seasons ago that he was in the MVP candidacy, and so many players from Kevin Durant, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Dwayne Wade, uh, uh, LeBron James, all these top players at the time who were top five were saying that Kawhi Leonard was saying that Paul George is a top player. But now y'all trying to put guys like Devin Booker and Jason Tatum and Jimmy Butler and all them who are good players, but have not accomplished what Paul George has accomplished, head and shoulders over Paul George. And when I look at who's the better player, I look at how you affect the game two ways, which Paul George does. Paul George, the only thing that's stopping Paul George is Paul George. I can say all I want, Paul George is the top 5 player in the NBA, but does he believe it? Does he believe it? Like I said, he was just an MVP candidate before he got hurt. He was an MVP candidate before he left for OKC. Many people in the league respect his game, but the only thing they've questioned is his mindset. Well, what I'm seeing from what I saw last night and how he played, I'm seeing a different Paul George. We can't no longer say his mindset is fractured. I think he's gotten over what happened in the bubble since last season in the playoffs where he led that team how far he did. And now that his mindset is going how it needs to go, you match that with his ability, you got a top 5 player, man. Now, where does that put Kawhi Leonard? I've already told y'all, I believe Kawhi Leonard is the best player in the NBA when healthy. I'll say it again. I believe Kawhi Leonard is the best player in the NBA. Some people are going to say Giannis Antetokounmpo. Some people are going to say Kevin Durant. That's fine. I say Kawhi Leonard because he affects both ways of the ball. His impact, he's the best playoff performer in the NBA, and his will and his drive, and it's mixed along with his skill set. All the things mixed into one is why I would put Kawhi over these guys. Some people are going to pick Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's fair because of what Giannis did last year. What he's doing this year, I'm very impressed how he's affected the game and gotten his shot better and his skill set. He doesn't seem rushed. He seems under control. Um, Kevin Durant's Kevin Durant. I mean, if you want to put him the best player in the league, okay, fine. That's Kevin Durant. Nikola Jokic, look, I'll talk about him in another video, but I know he won the MVP last season and all that's great, but there's a difference between MVP and best player in the NBA. So y'all can look at my other videos about how I feel about Nikola Jokic. Joel Embiid, again, I mean, he has the potential, but he has to show it. I've already said he's the MVP, but he has to show that he can be the best player in the NBA through the playoffs. But again, with Paul George, man, at the rate he's going, all he needs to do is win a championship this year. If he wins a championship and he performs how he's supposed to perform with Kawhi Leonard when he comes back, there will be no more discussion about is he a top 5 player in the NBA. Not only will him and Kawhi be the best duo in the NBA, which I already feel like they are already, he will be a top 5 player in the NBA by the masses, whether you like him or not. But that's all I got to say about that. You know what I'm saying? Continue to follow us on this Pull Up Basketball Podcast. Pull up a seat, pull up a chair, pull up. Peace. I like swimwear.